Is a cell tower going up in your neighborhood? If it's not now, it may soon. But tonight, Julie Watts asked the question you're not supposed to ask. Are there legitimate health concerns?
According to federal law, the city simply can't consider health concerns. It's outlined in this small section of the Telecommunications Act. Based on science from 1996, if cities do consider health, the cell companies can sue.
5G can be a tremendous boom, but only if it can be put up quickly. I know scientifically cell phone towers is safe.
But the International Association of Firefighters disagrees. They began opposing cell towers on fire stations after firefighters complained of health problems. So, following lobbying by firefighters, Cork and his co-author exempted fire stations from their bill.
Do you think that maybe you should consider putting a pause on legislation that speeds up these towers until there's definitive evidence that there is no harm?
We can do a lot of studies, and there are people right now, believe it or not, who are sure the world is flat.
5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications? My question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed?
There are no industry-backed studies to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
No, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We need to start measuring how much radiation are people being exposed to before we roll out 5G. What is our exposure in a day? It's not one cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up.
You're a trained medical professional.
Yes.
We don't have one on the panel. What are we to make of the American Cancer Society, for example, telling us there's no evidence of harmful product?
That many of these organizations have conflicts of interest.
Very briefly, if you can, what do you mean by conflict of interest?
One of the first things that you teach residents is that you always have to look at the funding.
The FCC has been described by Harvard University's Center for Ethics writer Norman Alster as the most captured agency in D.C., acting more as a industry cheerleader than a regulator.
For example, the previous chairman of the FCC is Tom Wheeler. He was the head of the Wireless Lobby Association for 14 years. Now remember, Obama told us there would be no lobbyists in his administration, so he took the biggest lobby and put him as a head of the FCC.
Yes, 5G will connect the Internet of everything. If something can be connected, it will be connected in a 5G world. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers, requiring massive deployment of small cells. We won't wait for the standards. The 5G revolution will touch all corners, and that's damn important.
SAR stands for specific absorption rate, and that's the measure of how much RF energy, in this case radio waves, is absorbed into the human body. So it's a measure of the heating effect that a radio transmitter would have on your body, on the human body.
The SAR for every mobile phone is measured in this way, using an artificial head called a SAM phantom. This is filled with a glucose mixture which represents the brain. The probe measures the amount of microwave radiation that penetrates the SAM phantom skull.
The SAM head is an average shaped and sized human skull.
But when we investigate the company that makes the SAM phantom head, we discover that the news is even worse. The Sam Phantom isn't just the average of 10,000 people. It's the average of 10,000 US Army personnel.
You need to understand where SAR came from. I was there when SAR was invented. And the reason they did was because they were interested in developing microwave ovens and in understanding how to cook meat. And it's useful for understanding how to cook meat, but it has no application whatsoever that I have ever seen suggested or advanced for understanding mobile phones. It works for dead muscle. It has just no applicability, in my opinion, to live brain. Because the health risks associated with mobile phone fields have nothing to do with heat. So it makes no sense to say, I have a really great way of measuring heat when the measurement of heat is irrelevant.
You may have heard that because 5G only gets 1/64 inch or a few millimeters into the skin, it can have no biological effect. Well, whoever has told you that doesn't understand basic biology. The skin-associated lymphoid tissue is critically important to the immune system. As an example of the ability of the skin to resonate with 5G, the sweat ducts resonate like small helical antennas to absorb and reflect that radiation. Thinner skin will absorb more, thicker skin will absorb less, and this work has been published in peer-reviewed journals showing that the skin does have a biological response to millimeter wave technology.
That's where the mistake occurred, that the cartilage is non-absorptive. So the tissue properties of a living cartilage is similar to that of the face. It is not a plastic.
So for everyone listening, Sam doesn't have skin. And that's our biggest organ and one of the most important, especially for sweat glands and conducting electricity, which...
Correct. Wet gland is the proper word. Yes.
All right. Watch what happens when I plug it in. It becomes a transmitter for electric. All right, and look how far it transmits, look. So if you're lying in bed with that next to your head, that is all going into your head. And if you're on the phone...
Yeah, let me do it.
That's my hand there. Watch what happens when I pick my phone up when it's charging. So that is going right into your body now, all that electric is not just going into the phone.
This presentation exposes 14 flawed assumptions and counters them with peer-reviewed scientific studies that number in the thousands. These are the 14 flawed assumptions on radio frequency limits made by the FCC and ICNIRP. Some of these assumptions are simply wrong. They're based on inadequate testing procedures. Some are ignored, and the safety factor is arbitrary. And finally, 5G is untested, yet it's assumed to be safe. These claims by the Federal Communication and the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection are false. Ionizing radiation is the wrong model for non-ionizing radiation. Environmental effects, synergistic effects, and characteristics of the waveform are ignored. And finally, the safety factors designed for the public and for workers are arbitrary and do not protect against damage.
The data we're going to look at are all published science, testing results, or public standards. At the bottom end of the radiation scale of what's called power density or signal strength is the minimum level at which cell phones will work. Pine needles were found to age prematurely at 0.000027. At short-term exposures of 0.05, children aged 8 to 17 experienced headache, irritation, concentration difficulties, and behavioral problems. Point 1 is the biobiology or building biology guideline for extreme concern. 1.0 produced sperm DNA fragmentation and a decrease in sperm viability in vitro. Also at 1.0, the science shows the following bodily effects can occur. 2.5 saw altered calcium metabolism in heart muscle cells. 4.0, changes in the hippocampus affecting brain memory and learning. And at 6.0, DNA damage in cells. A single Itron smart meter with pulses up to 7.93 microwatts per centimeter squared. Even though there are all these known health effects at levels far lower, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg see fit to set the standard at 9.5. And China, Poland, and Russia, 10.0. A room of 12 smart meters, very common and even a conservative number in an apartment building, tested at 19.8 microwatts per centimeter squared. In Canada and the US and several other civilized countries, the safety limit is set at 600 to 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared.
I'm going to ask you to help me out here. Please go to the settings on your phone. Under General, then go to About. Now you have to scroll all the way down to something you don't normally see, called Legal. Now click on RF exposure. You can read it later, but it's basically telling you that you cannot keep the phone directly next to your body without exceeding the as-tested exposure guidelines. But all smartphones come with some information that basically says, don't keep the phone in your pocket or you will exceed the as-tested exposure guidelines. This is just to show you what happens in a 4-second mobile phone call. This is power density. And of course, a phone is on standby, it's not doing too much, but 900 times a minute, it's looking for a signal. Now, when the phone rings, the worst time for you to put a phone right next to your head is when you answer it and say hello, because it's smart and it goes to max power. It's going to go to max power, you're going to listen, and then it will go up and down and up and down. And again, it's that variation over a lifetime of exposure that looks to be biologically important.
In the last 4 or 5 years, it's become more clear how microwave RF can cause stress in cells. And it appears the evidence really strongly supports the hypothesis that this is done by increasing oxidative stress. Microwaves increase the level of production of free radicals within living tissue in cells. Our cells have gated calcium channels that can open or shut more depending on physiology. Exposure to magnetic fields at many different levels of magnetic field will open up these gates farther. And this increases the action of this enzyme, producing more nitric oxide, which in turn creates peroxynitrite, which increases the production of NO2 and of the hydroxyl radical, increasing oxidative stress in tissue. So the microwave radiation doesn't break cell structures itself, but it alters our metabolism, creating more production of oxidants in the cells that creates inflammatory damage. This is an electrophoretic, a method of measuring fragmentation of DNA, where this is complete DNA and fragments don't move through the gel as quickly and leave a trail behind them. And when you see a lot of fragments like this, a tail, it means that the DNA is broken and there's pieces of it that aren't the same size. And you can measure that tail. And this is looking at a measurement of DNA fragmentation in rat brains that were exposed to a level of microwaves 1/3 of the FCC limits, 2 hours a day for 35 days.
It's pretty ugly, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's constant as well. One thing you'll notice is it doesn't stop. It's 24/7. This is what's coming out of the mast. If you're within 200-300 metres of the mast up there, this is what you're going to be exposed to 24/7.
When you can hear it, it changes everything.
It does.
Imagine if you could see it.
It'd be the equivalent of sort of, seeing a daily smog.
Yeah. What if I try and make a call? Let me try and make a call.
If you try and make a phone call, it'll be almost constant, because it starts a proper sort of two-way high bandwidth transmission.
Okay, let's do that. Oh wow.
So as soon as it picks up, this is it trying to, and this is once it's on call mode, this is now what the phone's doing.
And that's waves going from my phone to the base station and then being transmitted from there.
And that's it's picked up.
That's horrible.
And that's basically what your phone's transmitting into your head all the time that you've got it operational and you're using it for phone.
Dylan, my son, he said, Dad, you have to check these earphones that everybody's wearing, right? The wireless earphones, everyone's wearing them. And here's one of my son's good friends who I saw these in your ears all the time. Yeah. I'm sure, Vlad, you've heard us say those things are bad for you. My kids probably told you that, but you're still wearing them. Yeah. One thing we know about electromagnetic frequency is distance is the killer. Many people are using these thinking, okay, my phone is further away, but obviously giving a signal from your phone that's being picked up by the wireless headset. I'm 0.03, you can't see that? 0.02, which is a very safe level. Cellular damage starts at 0.5. That's not my opinion. That's the science. Let's connect your music to that.
Connected, we're playing.
Okay, you're playing. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this in to here. 1.9, 1.7, 2.3, 2.9, 3.4, 3.8, 4.6, 4. You see what's happening here? 0.5 is the damage point of DNA in cells, and yet he's far beyond that point. Right at the, look at that, 15, 17, 20, it's surging even higher right now. I mean, that's amazing numbers right there as far as when you understand what that's doing to his cells and his brain. Okay, now let's for fun, let's compare wire. Let's do the old-fashioned stuff. Okay, let's take a measure of this now. Same song, 0.03, 0.0, Dylan came close with his phone, 0.1, 0.2, still under 0.5.